Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Georgia State Representative Mike Glanton.
Good morning once again. If you have not already, you will receive during this summit a challenge coin. The Foundation of Excellence in Education Challenge Coin was instituted by the foundation in 2012. When Governor Jeb Bush was Commander-in-Chief of the Florida National Guard, he would often travel around the state and present a coin similar to this to deserving military men and women. The tradition and history of the challenge coin dates back to World War I and the United States Army. It is a challenge and a reminder to those who receive one to remain loyal to the mission and to stay the course. Today, your coin is presented to commend you for your efforts thus far and to remind us to stay the course for education reform. A quality education for every child, the future of our country, and national security depends on it. Congratulations and thank you.
I want to be a marine biologist. I want to be an artist when I grow up. Be a police officer riding a motorcycle.
I want to be a surgeon.
Biomedical engineer.
Be a teacher.
A doctor.
When I grow up, I want to be an astronaut and explore space.
Education can change a life. It unlocks the door to opportunity. Our great nation was founded on the principle that with hard work, every American has the ability to succeed. And it is our moral obligation to ensure that every child is equipped to achieve their dream. But our children cannot wait for incremental change. We need to prepare them today by investing in new ideas and new approaches. The future of our country depends on it. Internationally, the United States ranks 17th in reading and science and 25th in math, compared to students in other industrialized countries. Almost 70% of all U.S. fourth graders are not reading at grade level, scoring below proficient on national reading assessment tests. And only 1/4 of our students graduate from high school prepared for college. If we don't completely transform education, we are defaulting on the American dream. It is our leaders today who will ensure that opportunity is alive and well for generations to come. And we have been seeing dramatic changes in states across the country. 20 years ago, Massachusetts embraced multiple reform strategies. And today, students lead their peers in the states with math skills that rank among the top nations in the world in academic achievement. In 1999, Florida embarked on its mission to transform education. It stopped accepting excuses for poor performance and started challenging the status quo. More students are reading on grade level, passing rigorous college preparatory courses, and graduating from high school than a generation ago. Reform works. The common denominator? A conscious decision by state leaders and educators to focus on students. An unwillingness to accept excuses. The boldness to hold adults accountable for making sure every child receives one of the most precious gifts our country can provide. A quality education. Success is never final, so reform is never finished. Work in these states continues, and many other states have embarked on similar paths. But the work is not done.
When I grow up, I will be a police riding a motorcycle. I will be a teacher. I will be a marine biologist. I will be an artist. When I grow up, I will be an astronaut.
Join the movement to provide each and every student an education that prepares them to be successful.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Executive Officer for the Foundation for Excellence in Education, Patricia Levesque.
Good morning. Try that again. Good morning. Good morning. Representative McGee, one more time. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. That's better, class. On behalf of Governor Bush and the Foundation and our staff at the Foundation for Excellence in Education, I want to welcome you all to the 2013 National Summit on Education Reform. We are so pleased to have our 6th annual summit here in Boston, Massachusetts. Massachusetts is a leader in striving for excellence in education. As you saw in the video, more than 2 decades ago, Massachusetts leaders embraced a recipe for reform: high standards, school accountability, school choice, and today they lead the country in student learning. We thank the several Massachusetts lawmakers who are here. Commissioner Mitch Chester, if you'll stand. And we thank all of you who traveled from much farther away to join us. This year we had a record audience. We have more than 850 attendees, with more than 260 of you as elected officials representing 47 states, as well as Guam and Washington, D.C., and we have several international counterparts here as well. We could not host this event each year without the generous support of our summit sponsors. You'll see their names on the screen during all of our keynote and general session events. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our sponsors, and I hope that you will join me in thanking them. We also want to thank all the charitable organizations that support our work throughout the year and make our operations possible. We thank you as well. Since last year's summit, we had 3 new members join the board of the Foundation for Excellence in Education: Secretary Condoleezza Rice, Laureen Powell-Jobs, and Charles Schwab, and they will be joining us, most of them, throughout most of the summit, and I want to ask you to join me in thanking them for joining the Foundation board. You know, the National Education Summit is the Foundation's flagship initiative, and the purpose is for once a year, for 2 days, to bring lawmakers and policymakers and the best and brightest education reformers from around the country together so that you can learn from each other, so that you can feel refreshed and energized and bring ideas back to your state to implement. So in addition to joining and participating in all the strategy sessions this year, we also want you to join in the online conversation that will be occurring. So in your registration packets, you got a Twitter cheat sheet. We hope that you will use all of these Twitter handles throughout the 2 days to tweet and post on Facebook. Remember to use hashtag EIE13 when you are doing your postings. You can also follow on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at our account @ExcelInEd. For those of you who have friends who couldn't join us, we will be live streaming every single keynote and general session, so go to www.excelined.org. You know, the theme of this year's Education Summit is on your program books. If you see the apple there, that is listed with all the key elements of education reform. And this is because the Foundation believes that there is not one single silver bullet. There's not one policy that if you pass this policy, everything will be cured in public education. We believe in comprehensive reform: school accountability, effective teachers, customized digital learning, and massive amounts of school choice. And we hope that as you spend your next 2 days, that you will take more than one idea back home. Take a comprehensive list of ideas back home and try to implement them in your state. Now, as we all know, great educators are one of the most important keys to a better education. Governor Bush believed this while he was in office, and he understands how important and key good teacher input is in developing policy. So when he first took office in 1999, he established a position in the governor's office called the Teacher in Residence. And for all 8 years of his term, he had a teacher in residence that advised him and advocated and was a liaison to teachers across our state. We are very honored to have Governor Bush's first teacher in residence join us this morning, Cheryl Cliett. Cheryl has had an outstanding 30-year span of work in education, And after she left the governor's office, she returned to teaching in 4th grade at Canopy Oaks Elementary School in Tallahassee, Florida. And we are thrilled to welcome Cheryl Cliett.
I'm very honored to be here and struggling with glasses as I get older, so some of you may understand. Thank you, Patricia. It is so great to have an opportunity to be with so many leaders who are passionate about education. So as we begin these 2 days of collaboration, I've been asked to share with you a little story. About 20 years ago, I stood in the back of a room at the Chamber of Commerce meeting carrying a giant scrapbook underneath my arm. I was a teacher on a mission. You see, I had come to a point in my teaching career where I realized that I needed to change the way in which I taught mathematics. I learned to relate mathematics to the real world, to involve students in the learning process, and to make concepts concrete, real, and exciting. So this led me to find models for millions that students could see, learn from, and touch. My students collected 1 million grains of rice, and then we collected 1 million kernels of corn, and then we counted 1 million holes in a window screen. And then I came up with the crazy idea to collect 1 million pennies. We thought students needed to realize that little things do count. To be honest, when we began this quest to collect 1 million pennies, we did not have a clue that 1 million pennies weighs 2.9 tons. We decided that the pennies that came in from our student body would be returned to our library to buy children's books. And the pennies that came in from the from the community would be returned to the local library to buy children's books. So the quest for 1 million pennies immersed the entire school in hundreds of curriculum-rich activities designed to make our students experts with giving hearts. Well, we renamed our media center Penny Central, and we built the Patriarch Penny Tree. And then we all decorated our rooms. And we wrote the Common Sense Proclamation as we prepared for the kickoff rally. We looked far and wide for the perfect person to give the first penny. And then we realized the perfect person was already at our school. He had come as a volunteer from the Grand People organization and had faithfully served our school for 2 years. So we called him Grandpapa Penny, and we showed that young and old, we could all contribute in meaningful ways. Well, the pennies began rolling in, and we created a wall of fame and began a letter writing campaign with famous people. We asked for a picture and 1 penny. Then we began to count the pennies, and we graphed the pennies, and we did science fair projects on the pennies. With publicity, though, the auditors came to our school. They wanted me to receipt every penny. And they wanted the pennies locked in a safe every night. Now, if you're in a school, you know a safe is like this, right? Well, we didn't let that deter our effort. We decided that these demands would not dampen our spirit, and we overcame that obstacle. I think one of our business partners insured the pennies, and there may have been some kind of little waiver we got from the school board, but we didn't quit. Well, from the first day that I came up with this crazy idea, my dream was to have the First Lady of the United States give the last penny. But I didn't think there was a chance in the world that she would come to Sealy Elementary School in Tallahassee, Florida. But that brings me back to that mission. I heard that Jeb Bush was speaking in Orlando. And so I took a personal day and I drove to Orlando and stood in the back of the room waiting for his speech to be over. My knees were shaking, I could barely speak, and I'm not sure I was breathing very well as I moved over to him when he finished the speech. When he turned and looked at me, all I could say is, "I'm a teacher, will you help me?" And he did. Jeb Bush arranged for his mother, Barbara Bush, to come to Sealy Elementary School to celebrate our success and to give the last red cent to Common Sense for Education. The pennies were dressed and ready for the big occasion. And that was a day we'll never forget. I think she put one extra one for the second million, but I did not do that. And that, if you're from anywhere in Florida, you know that's the A&M marching band who came and played the Stars and Stripes Forever as our children had their homemade flags on a straw on the next slide. Many years later, the man who recognized the importance of encouraging excellence and excitement in learning and helping students achieve their goals came to be Florida's governor. And shortly after he was elected, I visited Governor Bush to congratulate him. And like any Southern lady, I took a homemade pound cake. As I left his office, I quipped, kidding, "If you ever need a teacher, let me know." Well, he ran after me and says, "Hey, that's a great idea. I'm going to have a teacher on my staff, and you're going to be the first teacher in residence." We think I may have been the first teacher in residence in any governor's office in the nation. Jeb Bush challenged the system and reshaped education in Florida. As governor, he spent time visiting schools, hundreds of schools, where he listened to students and he visited their classrooms, he listened to teachers, and he opened the doors of communication. He embraced common sense in education. Governor Bush, you changed my life and the lives of children all over this country. Thank you all for being here this week and for all that you do for students every single day. It is my honor to introduce the chairman of the Foundation for Excellence in Education, my former boss and my friend, Jeb Bush.
Spectacular. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Cheryl. Thanks, Cheryl. Thank you very much. What Cheryl didn't tell you, there's a postscript to this story, and that is after she, like a lot of the really talented people that I had a privilege to work with, ended up having better things to do and went back to their real world. She decided that she was going to, in her new elementary school, have a 1,000,000-step contest where she would count all the steps that all the children and all the teachers and all the people that were volunteering in the school participated in. And I got to be one of the steppers, and I was there at the beginning and there at the end, and we had the Rattler Band there at the end of that one too. It is a joy to be here in Boston. I really appreciate all of you guys coming. It's really, I think, important that we have this summit in this great American city. America stood by Boston when it confronted terrorism in April. And America will celebrate with Boston next year when it hosts the second biggest marathon in its history. Demand for the race is so great that there are an additional 9,000 entries. That's how a brave city and a resilient people That is truly how a brave city and a resilient people respond to a cowardly act. This next Boston Marathon will be a 26-mile victory lap for the city and for the nation. It will be a particular victory for Erica Brannick, a preschool teacher who lost her left leg and almost her life in the bomb blasts. She was there to support her mom, who ran in the race but never finished. Both are returning. Erica's desire to get back in the classroom helped her through the ordeal. You can now find her at Davenport Pre-K outside of Baltimore, working up to a full-time schedule. She uses her rehabilitation as a teaching opportunity for her young students. They're getting an up-close lesson in courage and dealing with disabilities. They think it's pretty cool that I roam around school on wheels, she says. I have fun with it. They ask me all the time, when are you getting the new leg? Researchers have spent years trying to figure out what makes an effective teacher. It's not advanced degrees, it's not certifications, it's not spending 20 years on the job. It's what Cheryl has and what Erica has. So let's dedicate this conference to great teachers without whom no amount of education reform would be successful. So I'd like to open our 6th summit with a question. A child enters kindergarten. His mom is a single parent who works a minimum wage. Perhaps he lives in the inner city or he's an immigrant learning English. What do we expect of him? Do we expect him to read by 3rd grade? Do we expect him to learn fractions, to write coherent sentences, to graduate from high school equipped to attend college, begin a career, or join the armed forces? Or as a society, do we look at his circumstances, dumb down his expectations, and give his school an excuse not to make every effort to ensure that he learns? Do we shuffle him through the system, promote him out of 3rd grade even if he can't read, let the 4th grade teacher deal with it, who in turn will let the 5th grade teacher deal with it, and so on until he's so far behind that nobody can deal with it? Perhaps we sanction this under the guise of self-esteem and compassion because it sounds right and it relieves adults of their responsibilities, but not their paychecks. So seriously, what would you do? Expect more of this boy or less? If you expect more, welcome. You're in the right place. When you boil down education reform to one guiding principle, it is this: every child can learn. And so we refuse to accept excuses that only set children up for failure and deny them the opportunity to achieve the American dream. That is immoral on an individual level and unsustainable on a national level if we plan to be world leaders in the 21st century. We set high expectations for every child, and we put in place strategies to achieve them. This is our mission, our labor of love, our reason for being here today, and our focus every day to reorganize education around students. With us today are liberals and conservatives, politicians and educators, business leaders and philanthropists, teachers and parents. No one group or one person has all the answers, but by working together, we certainly can find more of them. If you're here for the first time, I ask you to take advantage of this great opportunity. Fill your heads with knowledge, your hearts with inspiration, and then go home and become champions for children. And when you do, heed the words of Ironetta Wright. She was a principal in Jacksonville, assigned to the lowest performing high school in Florida, a perennial F school. Last year, it earned a B. And Wright transitioned to a job helping other principals improve their schools. This was her advice to them: you have to be relentless about it, and it's not for the faint of heart. This is also my advice to you as we look back on a tough but successful year. Those vested in the status quo in public education are fighting back harder than ever, and that's hardly surprising. We are challenging a $600 billion enterprise with more than 6 million employees. The old one-room schoolhouse has been turned into a government jobs program where the number of employees has grown 4 times faster than the number of students. Public education has become a labyrinth of political, bureaucratic, and union empires that depend on a captive population of students and minimal quality control. Empires do not go quietly into the night. They can't defend their past, so they attack those trying to change the future. They have their talking points down, the cast of villains are set, and their allies in the media anxious to tell their side of the story. But reform is maturing into a broad-based, bipartisan movement, and so now joining conservatives on the target list is a rapidly growing number of Democrats. You know, I used to think what the union said about me was bad. And then I heard what they were calling Rahm Emanuel during last year's teachers' strike. And after that, I had to invite him to the summit. And he'll be here tomorrow. Mayor Emanuel is relentless, and most definitely, he is not faint of heart. He is one of the many urban mayors in the reform movement. They're hardly ideologues, hardly conservative, and hardly in cahoots with the so-called villainous corporate interests. They simply are on the front lines dealing with decades of failure and fiscal recklessness by an education system dominated by union politics and enabled by pass-the-buck politicians. Well, the buck finally had to stop. And now these mayors must deal with massive and chronic budget shortfalls, not to mention dropouts roaming the streets. They see the juvenile detention centers filled with kids who never learned how to read. In Washington, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Chicago, there are dozens of half-empty, failing schools being shut down, while parents line up for charters. We have a glut of schools that parents don't want and a dire shortage of those they do want. And is it any wonder, for decades, our most vulnerable kids have fallen through the cracks and under the radar with nary a word of protest from those who now can't complain enough about the attempt to stop it. Half of our Hispanic and African American fourth graders are functionally illiterate. They are 2.5 years behind white students. Walk into a first grade classroom in Florida, Texas, California, New York, or any of the states in which you reside. Look at the faces and tell me how much time do we have to turn this around. And the problem is much bigger than that. Only 1/4 of students taking the ACT this year qualified as college ready on all 4 sections. Half of the students entering community college require remediation. About 1/3 of high school graduates fail the military entrance exam. Our students' performance on international assessments in reading, math, and science can best be summed up as mediocre. We worry about whether our kids have self-esteem. In Asia, they worry about whether their kids have a deep understanding of algebra and science. How will America remain the most dominant nation on earth when we are a middling nation in the classroom? The average age of our skilled manufacturing workers is 56, meaning that the next few years should be a time of incredible opportunity for a new generation of machinists, operators, craft workers, distributors, draftsmen, and technicians. But where are they? Instead of workers lining up for high-paying jobs, the Manufacturing Institute is warning of a, quote, worsening talent shortage that threatens the future effectiveness of the United States manufacturing industry, unquote. If trying to reverse this is a war on public education, I think it's time to redefine what public education is. My suggestion is this: it is the public's obligation to provide each child with the best possible education without regard to provider. There is no magic formula that makes kids smarter. We're not sending them to Hogwarts with Harry Potter. Instead, we must rely on a variety of reforms which in concert can produce strong gains. We have to begin with early literacy. I do not understand the logic of promoting illiterate third graders into fourth grade. It falls into the category of who do they think we're kidding? They cannot read the assignments, they can't do the homework, they can't prepare reports and pass the tests. And as a result, they're 4 times more likely to drop out. 85% of kids who enter the juvenile justice system are functionally illiterate. 70% of prison inmates can't read above the 4th grade level. Illiteracy destroys lives, and nothing focuses schools on early grade literacy more than retention policies backed by strong intervention policies and well-trained teachers. Next is school choice. We have the most diverse student population in our history. It defies common sense to corral them all in the same early 20th century education model and expect them to thrive. It makes less sense when their neighborhood schools have a long track record of failure. Bureaucracies are not designed to innovate. They don't like competition. They don't like accountability. What they like are no surprises and secure jobs. So we have an education system woefully behind the times. It has been isolated from the very forces that have driven American innovation and success for more than 2 centuries. There should be more options across the board. Charter schools, homeschools, vouchers, tax credit scholarships, and education savings accounts, all allowing parents to shop for the school that best meets their child's needs. Third, we must look at the world that our kids live in and the world that they're educated in and compare the two. Look, they come home from school, they drop their backpacks laden with 25 pounds of books and supplies. They pick up their iPads or another tool, they tap on an app, and off they go into the digital realm. Bam Bam from the Flintstones becomes Elroy Jetson. We need to make education relevant to 21st century kids, and that means communicating with them on their terms as digital natives. With digital education, kids can go to class anytime, anywhere, in their own style and at their own pace. Kids in rural Mississippi can take the same advanced placement courses available to students in Boston. A math whiz can take 6 months to get through Algebra 2, while other kids, it might take 11 months. 45% of college students now take an online course, and that number has doubled in the last 5 years, and my guess is it will continue to grow exponentially. With growing pressure to bring down college tuition costs and increasing competition for students, colleges are adapting fast to digital technology. Shouldn't we prepare our high school graduates for what is coming next? Yet in most states, protectionist laws retard the advancement of digital learning because it's a threat to union jobs. Let's be clear. This would be like newspapers being allowed to block bloggers or the social media, or the post office being able to block email. I would, in fact, be in favor of the post office doing that if it was only spam. We are letting the past thwart the future, and it is putting kids at a disadvantage. Fourth is accountability. The old model of education that made student achievement optional had predictable results. The kids who were easy to teach got the best education, and the kids who had a more difficult time to learn got the worst. You stop this by demanding all kids be taught. And then you measure results, and you sanction failure, and you reward success. The best accountability system I know is a simple A through F grading scale based on student learning. Now, I know, it sounds like a radical idea to grade schools A, B, C, D, and F, so that there's no secrecy about this, total transparency, but it seems to work when it's been applied in the right way. It gives parents an easy-to-understand snapshot of the state of learning at their child's school. Transparency should be encouraged, not fear. States can drive remarkable results through their grading formulas. For example, in 2005, Florida began including the progress of students with disabilities in our grades. Ever since, Florida has led the nation in learning gains by students with disabilities, according to the nation's report card, the NAEP. Schools respond to direction. Don't be timid about giving it to them. Next, we have to upgrade the teaching profession. Great teachers matter a whole lot. A child in the classroom of a great teacher gets a year and a half years worth of learning in a year's time. A student in a classroom of an ineffective teacher, on the other hand, gets a half a year worth of learning. So when the school lets out in June, a student who had a great teacher walks out the door a full year ahead of a student who had an ineffective teacher. And imagine if that happened for 2 years running. It almost dooms that child that was stuck with an ineffective teacher because that learning gap becomes difficult to overcome. Yet we pay both teachers generally across this country, we pay them the same. If there were layoffs and the ineffective teacher had been hired a day earlier, in most states, the great teacher would be sent packing. If the great teacher got frustrated and quit, little if any effort would be made to keep her. This may be a union-friendly model. It's certainly not a child-centered one. It certainly is not a model designed to attract the best and the brightest into the teaching profession. Great teachers need to be recognized and rewarded. And what will happen if we do that? The way we could do that is to eliminate tenure and evaluate and pay teachers based on their performance instead of how long they've been on the job or how many degrees that they've had. And lastly, high standards are a critical element of reform. Standards define what children are expected to learn over the school year, what they need to know to prepare them for success for each grade. Ultimately, the quality of the standards determines whether a high school diploma is worth more than the paper it's printed on. To compete with the rest of the world in the 21st century, we must produce competitive high school graduates ready for college or meaningful careers. That means we have to raise the bar to make sure the skills that exist that they're learning are aligned with what employers and college presidents expect high school graduates to know. These skills include critical thinking, problem solving, and verifying work. The Common Core state standards were designed based on these skills. I understand there are those opposed to the standards. Trust me, I understand that. But what I want to hear from them is more than just opposition. I want to hear their solutions for the hodgepodge of dumbed-down state standards that have created group mediocrity in our schools. Look, criticisms and conspiracy theories are really in vogue right now, apparently, particularly in Washington, D.C. Just watch cable news. They're easy attention grabbers. Solutions are hard work. I hope you all will be problem solvers and be decisive and resolute. How do we delay a parent's right to send her child to a better school? How do we delay efforts that better ensure children in first grade will be able to read in third grade? Delay is a strategy designed for the comfort of adults, not the progress of children. In 1984, the Florida Education Commissioner complained that the pace of reform was overwhelming the system. We need some more time to chew what we already have bitten off, he said. By the way, the name of this, the largest building in Tallahassee, is named after this guy. I'm sure he was a great public servant. But after 14 years later, when I became governor, Florida was still chewing. And our kids were at the bottom of the barrel in national academic rankings. We abandoned delay as a strategy. We embraced full steam ahead as a strategy. That made adults really uncomfortable. But in a few short years, Florida became a national leader in advancing academic achievement of its children. What we discovered is that kids have a remarkable ability to up their game. We just had to get adults on the same page. So don't let them drag their feet. Act with urgency. Use your principles as your compass. Know policy. Be able to explain your positions. Persuade people. Stay focused on the long-term goals instead of short-term political calculation. Look to the many successes that have come from reform. By setting high standards and linking them to high school graduation, Massachusetts became a national leader in achievement. In 2011, its students were world beaters in math and science. Florida's focus on early literacy and ending social promotion in third grade elevated its fourth graders to second in the world in reading. Students in Indianapolis charter schools are getting the equivalent of 2 extra months of reading and 3 extra months of math in a school year compared to their peers in traditional schools. The Recovery School District in Louisiana took over that state's worst schools, converted many to charters, and now leads the state in student learning gains. And other states are taking note. Arizona has become a leader in setting up education savings accounts for qualifying parents to use on things like private school tuition, tutoring, and textbooks. In Wisconsin, the birthplace of school choice, the state is expanding a voucher program to provide more options for low-income students, not just in Milwaukee, but across the state. The state has implemented a number of policies beginning in kindergarten to advance childhood literacy. Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico have begun grading schools to flag failure and to recognize success. In addition to grading schools, North Carolina has begun a statewide voucher program for low-income students, and so has Alabama. And the Douglas County School Board, one of Colorado's highest performing districts, is showing that school districts can lead the way as well. It has created the first suburban school voucher program in the nation, adopted a market-based pay system for teachers, and is developing a higher set of academic standards and accompanying assessments. 4 of the school board members, by the way, are up for re-election this fall. Trust me, the unions are out to get them. So let me close with this. There was a beloved pediatric surgeon in Orlando named Dr. Ronald David. Diagnosed with terminal cancer, he spent his last years in the operating room restoring the most fragile of lives. When asked why he was so passionate about his job, he had this simple response: "I like the duration of the cure." Saving a young life produces the potential of a lifetime of purpose and meaning for that child. We need to think of education in those terms. I think of brothers Josh, Eric, and Chris of Merritt Island, Florida, who, thanks to the Florida Tax Credit Scholarship Program, were able to attend high school that best fit their learning needs. They graduated as co-valedictorians earlier this year. Chris is headed to the University of Central Florida and aspires one day to teach. Eric and Josh have signed up to serve their country in the United States Navy and Marine Corps. I think of Lakeisha, an 8-year-old son, whose 8-year-old son is part of Louisiana's voucher program. When I heard about this program, she recently said, I jumped on the chance to try something new for my son. I see the difference it made in him from an academic standpoint and as an individual. He loves school now and is more outgoing. I hope to be able to get my other kids in the program because I know that it works. I think of Katie, a young lady with autism whose mom used to email me about once a week during the 8 years I was governor. This little child, when she started school, still has autism, and her mom credits higher expectations and including children like Katie into the grading system, the accountability system, to make sure that she got the attention that she deserved. She recently wrote me, the high bar that was set taught her that through perseverance, self-discipline, and sometimes just slowing down and taking the time, she was able to accomplish her very best. I'm inspired by Hector Hernandez, a first-generation American. Hector was given the opportunity to work his way through Cristo Rey Jesuit in Chicago, Illinois. He would work one day out of the 5, go to school the other days, had no expectation of going to college, but learned through grit and determination and the purpose of work that it was important to do so, and he recently graduated from Brown University and last year and is now a Fulbright scholar. Look, this is a tough calling. It's taxing. It's politically risky for those that are blessed to serve and have to run for re-election. I know it's politically risky to do it, and it is absolutely necessary. So please maximize your time here. Ask questions, get business cards and email addresses, follow up, go home and spread the word. But most of all, be resolute, because meaningful futures hang in the balance, millions of them. The duration of the cure is wonderful when we succeed, and the duration of the consequences is frightening when we fail. Thank you, God bless you all, and enjoy the summit.